I'm live. Guess you should have read my script ahead of time. Good evening, everyone. How do I look in camera?
Good. I need to tip it up a little bit.
Cool.
You're
Yeah.
a little tall.
Welcome.
Well,
I'm Brendan.
Probably need to
Kilo Echo Zero Foxtrot Charlie Golf. Welcome to the live stream tonight. As you can tell, a little bit less prepared than last time, but we're gonna be here. We're gonna have some fun. So, I didn't tell you about the presentation. There's a small presentation I'm gonna do. I have my buddy Drew helping out. Let me get that presentation up here. Should be that one. All right.
Roomba decided to start.
Yeah, perfect timing on the Roomba too. Okay, you want to click to the next slide? Should be why are we building a Yagi? Okay, so why are we building a Yagi? What good is a Yagi? And what is a Yagi antenna? So, go ahead and hop to the next slide. Literally, it's only 2 slides. I love this one. Nice and easy. I'm going to have to read along because I don't remember what I wrote on here. Alright, it's named after its inventors, Shinto Yuda, and I'm going to butcher his name as well, Hintoshugu Yagi. In its simplest form, it is a driven element, usually a dipole, with a parasitic director and a parasitic reflector. The director, the front, and the reflector, the rear elements, couple with the driven front and rear elements to direct the energy forward. All right, we can jump back to the camera. That was a hard one. And you might need to unmute the video so you can monitor. That's coming off of this one. Yeah, you should be able to hear it. Oh, it's in thumbnail. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's coming through.
Fantastic.
It's on the
delay.
But yeah, it's coming through.
All right. So, if you're here, you've probably seen the email that included the list of parts, and we'll run through those really quick. You need a 25-foot tape measure, 1 inch wide, a 10-foot piece of 3/4 inch schedule 40, and I know one of the sets of directions I'd linked to of someone else doing the same project used 1/2 inch. The 3/4 inch is just a little bit easier to find all the parts, and it's a little bit more sturdy. Really, either one's fine. The important part is the spacing between the elements, and we'll get to that in a moment. You need 2 3/4 inch crosses, 2 3/4 inch T's, 6 3/4 to 1.5 inch stainless hose clamps, which isn't a standard size at Home Depot anymore, so I had to go a little bit larger. These are 1 and 3/4, so you end up with a little bit of slack. You need a length of RG58 cable, about 6 feet, solder, soldering iron, flux, and electrical tape. Your tools, fairly simple. 10 snips, but really a heavy-duty pair of shears or good kitchen scissors will cut the tape measure no problem. Wire cutters, wire strippers, a screwdriver, or nut driver, a PVC cutter, which I finally just got myself a pair of these. These do a fantastic job and are so easy to work with, and they make a fun noise. Sandpaper or a Dremel with sanding disc, and then a ruler or tape measure to make all the measurements, and that's it. Pretty simple. I bought all this stuff from the hardware store, including the PVC cutters, but not the RG58. All the actual other parts came to about $30, including the $15 on the cutter. So super cheap project that you can build one, give it away to a friend. My buddy Drew that's helping is probably going to end up with this one at the end as a way to encourage him to finally get his license. All right, so we haven't joined in Zoom yet, or again? I guess we hopped out of that one. We'll be right back. got art. Cool. Let's see if Art can hear me. Or is Art not muted?
Check the participants window and it'll show his, he's muted. Yeah, you can click on Ask Unmute. That'll put a prompt on the screen in front of him.
Sideways. Right. Okay. So, we'll dive right into it. If any of you guys have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And if you don't have any questions, just go ahead and put your call sign and name in there so we know who showed up and who's actually interested in these, see if they're worth us continuing to do. So, this is probably the simplest project that I've done in ham radio, with the exception of the soldering, and you'll see why when we get there. So, everyone knows how to use a tape measure, so I won't beat that one to death. But you, just like the directions I sent over, your first step is to take your PVC tubing, cut one piece to 11 1/4 inches. If you haven't used these ratcheting style ones before, they do the job super easily. And you end up with a great cut. Not exactly square, so be cautious. It might throw off your spacing a little bit if you are at an odd angle. So you cut one piece at 11 1/4 inches, a second piece at 6 7/8, and then a third piece that'll be the handle. This is entirely up to you. Here's one of the previous ones I built, and I made a handle long enough that it's not right in my face. So I have it set up so that I have room to tape on transceiver on here, my HT, and I'll dress this up a little bit nicer in the future, but there's the attenuator we built last month. Alright. So, after you cut the 3 pieces of the boom, or go ahead and make our handle. And this is entirely arbitrary, so I'm going to go that long. Okay, next up, cutting the tape measure. Again, don't waste your good Stanley tape measures on this. This is Harbor Freight Special all the way. You're going to destroy it, and you'll be fine with that, because it's a cheap tape measure. Alright. Cutting the tape measure is just as easy as cutting the PVC, if not easier. You cut your first piece at 43 3/8 inches long. A second piece at 35 1/8. And the driven element is going to be 2 pieces, each at 17 3/4. The lengths of these are important because that's what actually changes the frequency of your antenna. And if you're more accurate, you'll be able to get closer to the 48, I think it's 46.5 is what we're tuned for. And if you do something wrong, it'll probably still function. It just won't be as tight of a angle. It'll be more broad, or it might have weird radiation patterns to it. If you build a dipole with a 17 and a 17 3/4 inches long on one side and 18 3/4 on the other side because you measured wrong, you'll end up with it being a bad SWR and you can damage your equipment. So accuracy is important. So that's 2 at 17 3/4. So they said you can cut this with pretty much anything, tin snips or a good pair of shears. The tin snips don't leave a great edge. It kind of is sharp and easy to cut you. So you may want to cut them a little bit long and sand the edges to make them accurate if you don't trust your shears. And then double check the lengths on everything. Like that one, since I was talking and cutting, I'm about 1/8 of an inch over. But fortunately, since it's tape measure, it says how long it is. So I can just come right in here and take off exactly 1/8. Then we'll make the second one match. So that's all the cutting you have to do. You have probably 5 feet of spare PVC after that, and a good 12 or 15 feet of tape measure. If you're doing 2 of these, you can easily get 2 of them out of a single tape measure. That's actually maybe enough for a third by the time all said and done, out of 125 footer. Same thing with the PVC. The 10-foot chunk will be more than enough to build 2 Yagis, depending how long you make your handle. And if you decide to add a vertical handle as well. But that's just personal preference. Okay. The actual construction, super difficult. You can glue them if you want, depending how good a fitting your, how tightly fitting your fittings are. My last one I did entirely dry and never needed to glue it, and it just never came up. It also makes it easier to break down for transport. So you take your long piece, put a T at one end, and an X at the other. Your short piece with another X. Another X. Your handle. And another T. And if you don't glue them, you don't have to worry about having them all straight because you can always adjust them over time. Has anyone asked any questions in the chat?
Nope.
Cool.
You have Art and Bill.
Art and Bill. Hey Art, hey Bill. How you guys doing? Guess I should have made sure I had them unmuted so I could hear them if they talk.
Evening. I'm watching YouTube questions for you.
Cool. Yeah, throw any questions out that you hear.
And it looks like you got 19 on YouTube.
All right.
Doing well, trying to keep quiet and let you do your thing.
Fantastic. If you guys have any questions or if you see me making any mistakes, shout them out. But again, this is a fairly fun, easy one. Honestly, this is my first project as a ham was before I even got my license in the mail. I built this one. And it has worked fine because, yeah. I'm only building a second one because, well, I cut the old one in half so I could put in hardwire in the attenuator. This one I'm not going to put the attenuator into. I'll just show you how I wired up the other one. So I couldn't find the picture that Art sent me, but Art did a great job photoshopping the different parts onto the picture with descriptions so you could tell what was what. But after you see one that's built, you'll kind of understand what's happening. But we have the director, I just forgot what it's called, the driven element, and the reflector. And it sends the signal that way. So we'll put it all together now. So the director, which is your shortest one, is going to go in the front. And you can either measure it and do the math, or be lazy like me, fold it in half and figure out where the center is. And give it a little bit of a crease. Here's the slow and tedious part. If you didn't buy the right size hose clamps, there's a lot of screwing to do. So I'm going to grab my drill and be right back. Entertain the crowd, Drew.
Well, this camera's too big to carry outside and take a look at the CB on my truck, so.
Yeah, the gateway. You got to have something that gets you into the hobby. Next up, after I do this, I'm going to go up and help him fix the CB in his truck. Then I'm going to start coaching him on getting him his license.
I'm just smart enough to know that if I transmit with the SWR I have right now, something's going to catch on fire. So that's my knowledge base. Just smart enough not to catch my equipment on fire.
Well, we all start somewhere. Oh, who puts flathead screws on things still? And how do I not have a better flathead screwdriver?
I was gonna say check.
There we go.
One of those might be the right size.
You can tell how much rehearsal I did before this.
I was gonna say check the barrel of the screwdriver, because one of those might be the correct size nut driver to drive that.
Oh, this one. Oh, yeah.
Depending on if they're the same size or different size. Some of those.
Oh, ho, ho.
Yep, there you go.
That's why I brought Drew out.
And leave the bit in there, and then that'll drive it from the inside.
Do that one.
I did that earlier today. That's how I know that.
And we're all here to learn.
And 10 years at a hardware store doesn't hurt either.
Just so you know, Bill Carroll mentioned he dipped the tape measure ends in liquid rubber to protect them.
Oh, liquid rubber. That's a good call. All right.
Yeah, I was
guess
coming
Bill.
on the air to tell you that.
Oh, that's the trick right there. About 100 times faster. Well, now how am I going to stretch this out to it being a long enough video to get the YouTube algorithm to like it?
Yeah. Well, we go shoulder mounted with that camera and we go play with my truck.
There we go. Will you fit in the chuck directly? Oh. So, director, and you want that to be, most of these are supposed to be on the top so they're all in plane with each other. I don't know how much it'll really affect things in reality, but that's how you're supposed to do it. Alright, then we'll do the reflector in the back. The emitter is the one that actually is the most trouble, because that needs to be soldered. And then one of those other minor details, I don't know if it really affects anything. I've heard it does. If you have a big tail on your ties, on your cable clamp or hose clamps, and they're sticking towards each other, you're kind of changing the impedance and the resonance between the pieces. Your mileage may vary. Okay, so when we get to the emitter, this is the one that has some extra work to it. First off, we're going to solder to this. So to make your life easier, as in possible, you need to sand off the paint. And I found it's easiest just to hold your sandpaper on a flat surface and rub the tape measure against it until you get rid of the paint. So you're doing this on the outside of the tape measure, the curved, so it's curving away from you, so that when you mount it, the wires will be on top. Okay, so to make this easier, you want to click over to the webcam.
Solder station.
Solder station. Sorry for the shaky look here. We're going to go ahead and tin the ends of our antenna to make it easier to put on the wire. So clean tip, hot iron, hopefully with that just being sanded, your metal will be pretty clean. We've got 2 spots we're going to need to solder to. One towards one edge and one towards the other. Because one side we're going to attach our coax. How's it look on camera? Visible enough?
Yeah, decent.
Okay. And on the other side, we're going to attach our hairpin match, which we'll get to in just a moment. So it doesn't have to be perfect. We're just getting solder on there, ready to go, so that we can solder our other pieces to it. And the standard disclaimer of when you're soldering, don't forget to use your solder fan to keep the smoke out of your face. Because you don't want to be breathing the fumes. However great they smell. Okay, so we will go ahead and go back to the antenna itself. Figure out where I am on my... a 1-inch gap between the 2 driven elements. So I will go ahead and tighten down my hose clamps enough that I can shove my elements underneath. So I hope all of you guys are enjoying this streaming series. We have one more planned so far. Obviously, depending on everyone's interest, we'll do more. And hopefully that'll put us into June for the next month, and that puts us pretty close to field day, and hopefully we'll be back to doing stuff in person. So it might be a get everyone together, and everyone brings a handful of tools and all the components, and we build this in person somewhere. So we will see how that goes. I just got my shot yesterday, so I'm excited. I know a lot of you have already gotten yours. So hopefully in about a month and a half, everyone will be vaccinated and we'll be able to do stuff in person again. Because I haven't met 99% of you guys so far in person, and I'm looking forward to it. Because I haven't been to a single one of our breakfast at Denny's yet. So...
Which is a sacrilege given your last name.
yeah. Absolute sacrilege. Okay, so we got that done. Next up, coax. You can go as fancy with this as you want to. In my previous model that I built, I went a little bit excessive with it and actually drilled a hole and fished my coax through. You can do that, or this time I'm just going to tape it along the outside. It doesn't really affect anything because it's perpendicular to the elements. So inside the coax, or inside the tube or outside the tube, it's just cosmetic. And it just gives you cleaner handle if you don't have anything on the outside. Oh, I guess we should build our hairpin match too. So the hairpin match is a very odd looking thing until you get used to it. So that's in focus enough to see. It's literally a wire in a U shape. Or should I go back farther? Yeah. It's manual focus on this one, so you
Decently.
farthest ring forward. Yep.
Well, I kind of ended up zooming it in anyway, which helped.
Cool. So, short version of the hairpin match, and I might be off on this by a little bit, but essentially these two elements make up a dipole antenna, just like you're doing a antenna in your backyard for 40 meters or 20 meters, it's a dipole. Shield goes one way, center goes the other way, and it's an antenna. The hairpin match, in my understanding on a Yagi, of this Yagi, it brings the impedance down to 50 ohms because these aren't exactly half wave. I could measure it, but I don't remember how long 6 meters is. Or 2 meters. 6 feet. Obviously, we're not 6 feet. We're closer to 3 feet, but we're not exactly. But essentially, I should look this one up to double check. It's what makes the impedance of this antenna a 50 ohm antenna. So it looks like you're just shorting it out, and you are, but the electrical length of this, the wavelength of this in electricity is enough that it acts as a short stub, like a end-fed half wave, to make the impedance match the two ends. And I totally butchered that one, so I'm sure someone in the comments will have a good correction for me, or maybe even a better explanation, because some of you guys have been hams longer than I've been alive. But hairpin match is critical to this. So we start off for the hairpin match, a 5-inch piece of wire. Let me find that page. 5-inch piece of wire, strip off 1/4 inch at each end. So I'm just using regular house wire.
Another mention from Cliff Roser, who says rosin core solder only.
Rosin core solder only, yes. Do not pull out your plumbing solder. Pretty much for anything electronics, just like Cliff said, rosin core solder. There's really nothing else. It's not your plumbing solder. It's not stained glass solder. Rosin core. Leaded solder is still my preference. 60-40 is the way to go. It's getting harder and harder to find leaded solder. It's just so much easier to work with that it is what it is. I've been soldering with only leaded solder. I've tried a couple of times with the lead-free stuff, and it just does not flow very well. You got to use a lot more heat, a lot more work. Okay. So, just standard housing wire, household wire. I think everyone has scraps of this sitting around, even if you don't have a house. It just ends up everywhere. We're going to cut a 1/4 inch of insulation off each end.
Which that makes it about 14 gauge if anybody cares.
Yep, 14 gauge.
So
I forgot if I actually checked.
Household wire. I think everyone has scraps of the ground.
Oh, that's me coming back to it. Okay.
Ends up everywhere. We're going to cut a 1/4 inch of insulation off each end.
Okay, so a 1/4 inch off each end. Make a nice U shape with a 3/4 inch gap. So again, the shape and size of this is what makes it a 50 ohm antenna. If you don't do that properly, your antenna will not be a
once I
50
flatten it out
ohm
again.
impedance.
Well, you can flatten because I'm gonna fold it in half to keep it separate.
Okay, so off each end, make a nice U shape with a 3/4 inch gap.
Hey Bill, sounds like you have some background noise going on.
Shape and size of this is what
Okay,
makes it
so we'll jump back to the soldering iron
If you
again.
don't do that properly, your antenna
Just like Cliff said, rosin core solder. Just because it's still what I have sitting around, this is lead or silver bearing. Still good for electrical work. And with 14 gauge wire, you're gonna need
I just corrected it, sorry.
Yep, you're good. You're gonna need a pretty hefty soldering iron to effectively solder it. I have it's a 75 watt thermostatically controlled iron, and I've never had any issues with it, other than trying to solder ground radials on to like a PL259 panel mount when I tried making a disc cone or any of those style of antennas. That's the only thing that 75 watts can't handle, and then you probably need to pull out your big boy 150 watt old school soldering gun. Okay, so we get those tinned up. For clarity, I'm going to disassemble the antenna so that we can see the piece we're working on a little bit easier. Is that still in shot?
Yep.
Cool. So since we pre-tinned, it should be as simple as us heating up the joint and touching the wire to it. We don't want to go too hot for too long because we're again mounted to the PVC already. And we don't want to melt our PVC. So it looks like I'm actually going to need a little bit more solder to get a good joint on that. So we'll just bring it in. There we go. I'll go ahead and do the same thing to the other side. Again, sorry for the shakiness, and I couldn't figure out why, but I'm getting a ground roll in this camera. So you see the little shutter roll to it. It's annoying me, but I don't know if it comes through very much in the web stream. But I found it a little bit too late to do anything about it. Oh, that one went really well. So with it pre-tinned, we added on the extra solder. It went pretty well. Okay, and then I screwed it up. I snapped it right off. So if you start moving your joint too soon, you get a cold solder joint, and it doesn't make a good joint. So we heat it up hot enough that it flows really well, and then hold it perfectly still. While it cools. Next up, our coax. Tell me what's in frame. Is that visible?
Yep. It's in the just in the upper part.
So this is entirely up to you how long you want to do it and how much you want to get it fancy. I'm going to cut off about 2 inches of jacket. And then pull off the jacket all the way. Depending on what quality coax you have, sometimes the jacket is actually bound to it where it's melted in. And you might have to put a little bit more work into it. This is Davis RF RG8X, and it seems to be pretty nice to work with and good quality. But you're only using 6 feet, so as long as it's 50 ohm cable, it doesn't really matter so much. You'll be fine. And then we're going to peel back our jacket, or peel back our shield so we can use it. Handy tip, either using the back edge of a blade, you can undo the braid. Or if you have a jeweler's screwdriver, you can kind of put it in between the braid and pull it out. This is probably one of the more tedious parts of the whole thing. And I'll show you what I did on my last one. I actually did this, I pulled out the jacket and then heat shrunk it separately. So I ended up with 2 nice wires. This one, so I don't bore you guys to death, I'm going to do just a simple way. We're just going to twist it up, solder it, and then E-tape it. Because it's a good antenna, but I honestly haven't found a whole lot of use for it. And I'm only building the second one to use for direction finding. Okay. So we got our braid untwisted. We're going to pull that out and twist it up. Anyone have any questions or comments? I know this isn't exactly the most challenging or technically complicated project ever, so everyone's probably either seen this done before or done this or watched the video by...
Nothing
I
else
think-
has come across in the Facebook yet.
Okay. Yeah. K9 KB9VBR is one of the two people that we copied this from, and he did a great video on it. He does a lot better job in the video production. Mostly because this is a live stream, so this is... I don't really want it to look that great. Not bad, but it's more of an open form. So we don't need to tin the entire thing. I just want to get a good chunk of it tinned. So that it'll look nice, solder easily, and not be super messy. Alright. So I don't think the length matters. So you don't need to be exactly 3/4 of an inch length or exactly a 2-inch strip or anything like that. Obviously, do nice clean work and it'll work fine. Alright. Then I'm just going to go ahead and strip about a 1/4 inch of the center conductor as well. So most coax these days will melt if you put too much heat on them. I forget which type of the Teflon, I believe, is the one. Teflon insulated is the ones that don't melt very easily. And I don't think we see that very much anymore. I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong. So, just like when we were doing the soldering on the circuit board, you bring your heat in from one side with a little bit of solder on it for good conductivity. So I'm bringing in the heat from the bottom and the solder from the top. That way the solder gets pulled into the wire. And if the coax you're using is pre-tinned, it'll make this go a little bit easier. But again, it's no different from any other soldering you do, so. Oh, so Tuesday Night Net this week, they asked what projects you guys want to see in the stream. And I think we had an overwhelming number of people ask about Raspberry Pi projects. And we can definitely do that. But shoot me an email at info if you have a specific thing you want to see done. I know someone had talked about a server for their Arden node, which, for those of you who haven't heard about us preaching about Arden, it's the Amateur Radio of Emergency Data Network. It uses the ham-only frequencies of Wi-Fi, and you just install special firmware on your device, your access point or router. You have to use one of the supported devices, but it will let you link via the ham-only channels of Wi-Fi in a mesh style to other hams. So we have a STL Arden Groups IO channel. Is it a channel? I'm not really sure what it's actually called. Groups IO group, I guess, would probably make sense. That didn't work too well. I'm gonna grab a different solder. something a little bit more hefty. Just gonna do a heavier gauge solder here, just so I get a little bit more metal on the surface a little bit faster. This is again rosin core, and yeah, 6040, 0.062 diameter. You can see a little bit of difference there, how much metal that dropped really quick.
I would say that Radio Shack sticker makes it an antique, but considering they're back in business.
Yeah, we can all go buy our Radio Shack t-shirts now, which is exciting. I think they're web only right now, right?
They have a few retail stores in a few states.
And unfortunately, I'm sure St. Louis is not going to be one of them anytime soon.
Nope, there is one within the state of Missouri, as I recall, but not in St. Louis. I believe it's in Springfield.
Oh, okay. Alright, so we have our hairpin match and our coax feed line. What do you need for the next part of your coax? A connector. So if you weren't lazy, which you should have been lazy and should have just bought a pre-terminated cable, because it's cheaper to buy like 25 footer and cut it in half than to buy good quality connectors. Your next step is to solder on your connector. I'm doing a BNC just because it's kind of my connector of choice. It is good up to, I think it's 300 or 400 watts without any issues. You can probably go higher. And it's a lot easier to screw and unscrew than your PL259s. Obviously, you'll need an adapter to go to your HT, because most HTs don't have a BNC connector on them. Most of them are an SMA. And you can either buy an SMA adapter, like that, to fit your HT, was SMA to BNC, or a pigtail, which is just a short piece of wire with a connector on it. The two connectors on it. So if you haven't done a BNC cable before, it's pretty simple. You strip back your outer jacket, and then fold back your shield, cut your center to long enough that it fits inside of the pocket, and there's a small hole. I don't know if you'll see that one in the camera. Small hole that you can actually see your wire go into. And always test fit things before you start soldering. So I'm actually going to cut that a little bit shorter. I think you heard my son screaming in the background. Yeah, we'll go a little bit shorter with that.
According to Yale Interwebs, there are 450 Radio Shack locations that are back in business at the present.
Ooh, wow.
Sounds like they are mounting one heck of a comeback.
Yeah. But will they actually carry anything radio related? I know they haven't for... The only radios they had were cell phones and clock radios for the past, well, my entire life. They were not very helpful other than the small bins of connectors. So, even if it is only Radio Shack, I'll happily take them back with Gateway Electronics being gone, Hopefully only temporarily. I checked the website. It says only temporary, but I won't hold my breath. And Gateway being gone, and Show Me cables leaving the St. Louis area, which is also very disappointing. We're going to have a hard time finding any good supplies.
Well, and nothing can replace Doug's sarcasm.
Yeah. Alright. So, for BNC, you'll want to do a very light tin on the inner wire. Just because it helps the solder flow in. But if you do too much, like I just did, you may not be able to get it into your connector. So we'll try that again. I think this is always the part that causes me a problem. If you don't tin, you're not 100% sure you're going to get solder all the way through. But if you do tin, it's a very snug fit. For the sake of expediency, I'm going to go ahead and cheat, cut that off, and just do it without tinning. We should still be good enough. Again, we're not doing high power here. We're specifically building this for direction finding where you don't really transmit at all. And you definitely can't transmit if you hook it up through the offset attenuator. But if you want to use this for long distance communications to hit a repeater or for simplex communications, like the, I don't think we've technically announced it yet, upcoming simplex sprint. That'll be Memorial Day weekend. You'll be able to want to transmit and receive. Okay. So, back to this. You need to be very careful and heat the center conductor from the outside with just a touch of solder on your iron. And as you heat it up, you'll put solder into the hole. And you'll see it pulls a little bit of solder in. I don't think you can see that on camera because I can barely see it standing right here. And that's it. You've got a center conductor soldered in place poorly. There we go, poorly. So I didn't pre-tin. I'm sure someone's shouting at their screen right now. That's why you're supposed to tin! Someone will be shouting at their screen in 30 seconds with the YouTube delay.
One of the guys on the chat says there is actually a Radio Shack location in Mascoutah, Illinois that is currently operating.
Nice. I don't know where Mascoutah, Illinois is.
Down 64 near Scott Air Force Base, if I remember correctly.
Oh, okay. Alright. So, that's shoved back in there. We'll claim that it's properly soldered, because I don't think you guys want to see me screw around with it for a while. But again, it never really works out as well as you'd like it to. Alright, so I like to stretch my jacket back over the shield, so you can see there's a little part here that's flared out with a shield over it. And then you take your flush cutters, which aren't sitting here. Let me go to my bench and grab those to trim that up. Okay, so the shield, just trim. Honestly, eBay is about the best place to buy these since we don't have a good retailer in town. If you're patient, you can get them straight out of China for I think these are $1.49 a pair. You can buy better ones from Home Depot and get the micro pliers and flush cutters in a set for like 15 bucks. But these seem to last just as long. And if you're anything like me, I lose them or misplace them before they actually wear out. Okay. So I forgot to state this specifically, but don't forget before you do your soldering to put the ferrule on your cable, because you're not getting that unsoldered without a whole lot of cursing. So now we just screw our shell onto that back ferrule. You have to get the ferrule all the way up towards the front. And pinching the jacket there and the wire there is what actually clamps it and keeps your connector from unscrewing. Then depending on your application, I like to take a piece of heat shrink and put it on the wire from here to here and do just a little dab of hot glue right here at the tail end. So you do dab of hot glue, put your heat shrink on, and when you shrink it, the glue kind of holds the whole thing together and you get a good strain relief right there. Or else it all flexes right there near the shield and it can eventually come off. Alright, so we did it. We have built a BNC cable. Oh, I'm gonna get off my knees. You wanna go back to the real camera?
Yep.
So we built our BNC cable, attached it to our driven elements with a hairpin match. We're going to stick that on to our reflector. We're going to add our director. Then we're going to figure out if we did it right. I have my tester charging, so let me go grab that. Really glad I didn't do this from my office. I was originally planning on doing it from my company's warehouse because I have more space to do it there. But I've forgotten so many parts of this. Okay, so if you haven't seen it before, this is a Nano VNA. It is the cheapest, most functional antenna analyzer that exists. They're somewhere around $75 if you buy them off eBay or Amazon. And we'll see how we did. So if you haven't set one of these up, it's a little bit cumbersome to walk through on camera. There's plenty of tutorials online. But I have it set up for a 100 megahertz to 200 megahertz bandwidth. And if we did this right, we should be tuned for 146. 146.5 is actually the target. Yeah, 146.5 megahertz. So I have my cursor. I don't know if we can see that, or should I go to the soldering camera?
Probably the soldering camera.
So I have my cursor set at 146. Is that visible?
Tip it this way just a little bit. You got a glare from the overhead lights. There we go.
Cursor's 146, so we're a little bit higher than that, just like we're shooting for. And that is an SWR of 146. You can adjust the SWR. I don't know if we can set that in view somewhere, and I'll sit here and play with it, or if you want to hold it. You can adjust your SWR by the angle of the hairpin, and I don't really know how much it's going to affect it today.
Yeah, we can see it moving on there.
Yeah, okay. The angle of that, and your spacing. If your spacing is off, you can't really do anything without taking it apart and putting it in a different size. Let me make sure we're fully seated. Yeah, so we'll call that close. We got down to 131. And I wasn't measuring too close because I was more talking to the camera, but there you go. That's the antenna. All right, so next up, what time is it? I don't want to make this go too long.
7:56.
7:56. Oh my, we're almost on time. Okay, so
back on the big camera.
just based off of the measurements that are in the directions, we got an acceptable SWR. You can continue tweaking it to get better SWR, spacing between them, the shape of the hairpin, and double checking your lengths between the elements. So, now what? I have added into this other one the offset attenuator we built last week. Is that visible, or do we want to go to the...
It's visible, but it's a little out of focus. So probably if you're looking for tight detail. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Okay, so this is the offset attenuator we built last month. And literally, this bottom one that you're seeing is the line that goes to a BNC connector for the radio. And the top one is from the center point of the antenna. So that's the feed line to the radio and to the antenna. It actually says that on the back, I believe. Antenna and radio. So, that's it. Really simple. Center conductor to the outside, ground to the inside. Actually, was playing with mine, so everything's kind of wonky right now. But, okay, you got the two parts. What does that actually do for you? I can't really transmit now because the cameras do not like the RF. But what that does is it takes your... Let me grab a radio. Which camera? Big one?
Big camera. Yep.
Okay, so all you do is take your radio, and when we do our fox hunt, we'll tell everyone what the frequency we're going to be on is. You will take your BNC adapter for your radio, or PL239, whichever one you want to do. Shh, Shakespeare, hush. Attach your BNC adapter to your radio. And I grabbed the wrong adapter. BNC adapter to your radio. And if you have a radio that you can program this way, you'll want to set it up so it cannot transmit, because if you do, it'll blow up your offset attenuator, because it's not made to handle transmissions going through it. It's only made to receive. So you'll set your radio for both the main frequency that our Fox will be on. So let's just say 146.850, which won't be it, but it's easy to remember frequency. You're going to then set your radio for 146.850, and then also for 4 megahertz below that, 142.850. The offset attenuator takes the 146.850 that comes into the antenna and mixes it with a 4 megahertz signal to take it down to 142.850. So your radio would receive a strong signal at 146 and a weaker signal, a significantly weaker signal at 142.850. You'll then set your squelch to a low setting, and when the Fox is transmitting, which it does an intermittent transmit, I don't think we've determined exactly how long we're going to do it for. It'll do an intermittent transmit of a noise or a small song, call sign, and it'll do that every few minutes. So you'll set your radio to 146.850, listen for the transmission, and try to find what direction your transmitter's in. Then, when you get close, you'll be overloaded, or your squelch will be open from horizon to horizon. You'll kind of know a general direction that you're heading. Then you'll switch your radio to 142.850, so 4 megahertz lower. That will take only the mixed signal through the attenuator, and it'll only give you a very weak signal that you can then adjust with the attenuation knob. And you'll want to play with this, and we'll probably have a setup area where people can get set up and ask questions, because if you haven't done it before, setting your radio for 146 and 142 just doesn't make sense. So we'll probably have a couple of Elmers on hand to help everyone out and just answer some questions. So when you get close, you're going to flip over to the 142, and then you'll be able to do the same direction finding, but your pattern will be, or the signal will be weaker, so you'll be able to receive it over a smaller area. Because over here may be down 12 dB and won't be picked up by the antenna, but over here will be. So as you reduce your antenna farther and farther, you'll adjust the attenuator to a lower and lower gain on that offset channel. Then when it's still really strong, you'll go down another 4 megahertz. So 138, 850. It's a harmonic of the 4 megahertz, or the 146 to 142 to 138. So that's going to be an even weaker version. And from that point, you should be able to get within a fairly small degree and find exactly where you're heading. But it only helps you find direction. So you'll be able to figure out which direction it's in. You'll have to walk a little bit of an area and find out which direction it's facing and triangulate it. So that's the short version of fox hunting. Hopefully next month we'll be able to do a little bit longer version, and we'll go from there. So I want to thank everyone for joining us. If anyone has any questions or any comments, feel free to throw them in the chat. We'll hang out for a couple minutes to see if anyone has any questions or wants to call out any of my mistakes. I'm ready to hear it. I'm sure I said something wrong. But shoot an email to info@slsrc.org if you have any questions about this presentation or the last one. This presentation will still be available to come back and watch on our YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook if you aren't already. Come by STL Hams on Facebook and say hi. That's a good place to reach out to other hams since we aren't meeting in person right now. As of right now, we're still planning on doing field day in June in person. We're waiting on the county to let us know if we can use the park or not. If you haven't taken your test yet or you want to upgrade, shoot an email to to education@slsrc.org. Oh, I'm sure there's another message I'm always forgetting. Tuesday night nets, 7:30 on the 850 repeater. And yeah, let me scroll through my notes really quick and see if I forgot any of the messages. I'm sure there's a bunch.
And Bill's up on the webcam. Do you want to put him up on the broadcast?
Bill, do you want to do the presentation? All right. Hit us with some of the things. All right, Bill, you're up if you want to.
Hey, Brendan.
Yeah.
Unless I missed you say it, we're also going to have our next speaker is Bob Heil, K9EID.
How did I forget Bob Heil? Yes, thank you.
And then one thing I was going to mention about the antenna that you just built, I have not used an attenuator yet on a fox hunt, but what I have done in the past and works well for those tape measure beams is you can fold the tape measure in half and just tuck it into the hole of the PVC pipe, and that helps attenuate the signal when I'm getting too close to the fox.
That is a very good suggestion, Bill. I've only done that for storage. I hadn't thought of using it for attenuation.
We're going to put the big camera back on
Okay.
so they can see.
So, yeah, like, super easy idea. Smaller element means smaller surface receiving the signal, which means you get some more attenuation. So we're talking about this antenna and the offset attenuator. I know some people have already made in the past or have resistive attenuators. They do the same thing where it reduces your signal, but it doesn't work in the same way, so you won't change your radio to a different frequency. You'll stay on the same frequency with a resistive attenuator. And I'll probably just buy a kit to do one of those on my own, and if it's interesting at all, we'll make a stream out of it. So, Bill, any other announcements. I'm horrible at remembering the whole list without it being in front of me. Oh yeah, goldmedalideas.com. Oh, Bill, you're great at this. Goldmedalideas.com. You can get your SLSRC merchandise, water bottles, shirts, polos, hats. Most of the items you can get it with your call sign on it too. Gold Medal Ideas has been a great supporter of the club for years and years at Winterfest. It's been a decade plus from what I've heard, way before my time. But they've been great to the club, so help them out, give them some work. On the topic of Winterfest, we are going to be back in person in 2022, but we're looking for some more committee members, some more people to help with the planning and organization of Winterfest. With her new duties as grandmother, Rebecca will be taking a little bit less of a part, so I'm going to need some more people that can really kick butt and take command of that event. So shoot me an email at president@slsrc or info@slsrc.org. Either one. Any more messages or stuff from the chat? I know Bill or Cliff.
One cool thing, you have a ham on here from Titusville, Florida.
We have a ham from Titusville, Florida. That's nice.
Yeah, Kennedy Space Center Amateur Radio Club.
Kennedy Center Amateur Radio Club. That's awesome. All right. So if that's it, if no one else has any questions or comments, thanks a lot for joining us. We'll be back next month, the third Thursday, doing another kit or live build of something. That's it. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening. And next Friday, don't forget, meeting. It'll be taking place in that room where we're going to be doing a live stream. So join us then, 7:30, just like always. And it's Bob Heil. It's Bob Heil. Shouldn't that be enough reason to show up alone? Bob Heil. I mean, it's Bob Heil. If you don't know who Bob Heil is, you're not ham.
I'm not even a ham and I know who Bob Heil is.
Exactly. All right, thanks everyone. Have a great night.